Then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I just wanted to start by welcoming everyone to our webinar series. I'm Pam Rabin, my pronouns are she, her, and today we're tackling an important topic. So let me go ahead and find my screen here as I'm talking to you. I'm not good at talking and finding screens apparently at the same time. There we go. All right, everybody able to see my screen okay? Perfect. Okay, get myself together here. I'm seeing all my screens change every single time I start sharing, and I have to rearrange things the way that I want them. Okay, so I see a few faces from the last training that I was in. Thank you for, I know it's a lot of trainings to go from one right to the next. But again, I'll start off. If you just came in, I see a few new faces. Welcome to our webinar series. Again, I'm Pam Rabin. My pronouns are she, her. And today we're going to be talking and tackling an important topic, identity, equity, and education, and how we can leverage EdTech tools and strategies to be better at supporting our students in classrooms and even outside of classrooms, because I really think the skills that they develop in technology can blend into other areas of their lives. But before we dive in, I'd like to quickly introduce my colleagues from the EdTech team. They are my co-presenters today, and the conversations that we've had on this topic have formed the big ideas that we're trying to focus on. So I know I can't do this work without them. So if you guys just want to give us a wave, I'll call out your names. We have Carrie Lane, who is our project specialist in educational technology, Jessica Sierra, who is a project resource teacher in educational technology. Chris Garcia is a coordinator of educational technology, just like I am, and our director is Alicia Gallegos-Butters. So let me go on to my next slide here. Get down here. Boop. There we go. All right, so today, again, we're focusing on identity equity, which we think is a key piece in the larger puzzle of equity issues in EdTech. And I just want to point out that while it is a key piece, it's just one part of a much larger conversation around equity and education, and that all of these topics are very deeply intertwined. So you see on this slide right here, these are the different kind of areas within the ecosystem of EdTech and equity that we've been talking about in this series. We had talked about access to technology. We talked about equity and how that interacts with issues of artificial intelligence. Today's is around how we help students develop identity, how we celebrate identities, and a little bit about making sure that students can see themselves in the curriculum through EdTech. Next week, we'll be looking at experiential equity in EdTech, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And then finally, we're going to have our final series session around accessibility issues and how we can make sure that students are accessing content at with different abilities. Okay. So our objectives today range a little theoretical up front, but then we wanted to make sure that we're also adding in practical, concrete examples and resources that can be applied in the classrooms, or if you're an administrator, that you can look for as you're going about your work. We don't expect that anyone's going to become an expert after an hour. Just think of this as a launching point. So as a department, this session of series, we're hoping gives you insights into how we weave equity into our work as EdTech specialists. But after this, if you're looking for more in-depth work in diversity and equity and inclusion, I want to point you to our County Office of Education's amazing equity department, because you can take much deeper dives with them into the world of equity and what that means across the various levels of our system. And you can go to the county website to find that information. All right. So just starting off, what do we mean by equity? Basically, what do we mean by identity? Basically, we're talking about identity being a multifaceted concept. When you think about this, think about how different aspects of a person's life, their culture, race, and gender, different intersectionalities about their personality, shape the way individuals see themselves and how we see ourselves as educators. And then we also need to think about how we are positioned in relation to the opportunities or avenues for being successful within various environments. Often, we hear that this process starts with taking an inward deep dive or journey of self-actualization, where we're looking to understand our own identities, what we think of ourselves, and then we have the ability to think about how others might perceive us. And this kind of forms our outward identity. So when we have, when we're working together, we need to make sure that we're willing to kind of set aside our notions of ourself and be open to learning about and understanding our students' identities and positionalities, and understand that there's ways of knowing and being that might be different from ours. So it's a complex interplay of internal and external factors that define everyone's unique place in the world. And basically, this is my last theoretical slide here. This concept of identity is very closely linked with diversity and inclusion, which are important components for creating a sense of belonging for your students. So basically, it means that diversity means accepting and valuing that there are other kinds of people in a community, and that there can be a variety of cultural, ethnic, gender abilities, religions, and other differences within our communities. And that the larger we make our circle of concern, or who we consider the community, the more diversity we should expect to see. Inclusion is about making sure everyone, no matter their background, feels welcome and important where they are. And we know that there's a robust body of research that shows when educators foster this kind of environment where students can see their identities reflected and respected in their learning environment, they're more likely to actively engage in education, and they also are more likely to feel that they're an integral part of their community. So just kind of a show of hands, I wanted to ask some questions here of you. How many of you have specific routines or activities that you do to get to know your students and communities? Just real quick raising of hands. How many of you have activities? Thank you, Pamela. I see a nice name. I see a lot of thumbs up. I see things going on. Okay. Well, I'm about to give you 1 minute of think time. I want you to think back. If you're not in a classroom anymore, think back to maybe when you were, or things that you have in your own work that you do. Just to get to know, either it might be children that you work with, it might be parents, it might be community, but what are some of the activities that you do on a daily basis as you go about your work to engage with students and get to know people? And then what I'm going to do is set my timer on my slide deck here for 1 minute. And I want you to think about what you might put in the chat. And when the minute is up, that's when I want you to hit the submit button. And what we will have is what I call a waterfall of responses. If you would like to unmute and tell us a way that you have used in your experience to welcome students, a way that you get to know them, a way that you are celebrating their different backgrounds and intersectionalities, then you're welcome to unmute and have that conversation at that time. But let me go ahead and start the 1 minute, and we'll give ourselves that think time. Okay, that's our buzzer. If you've put something in the chat, please go ahead and push that submit button. And let's just take a moment to read through the chat. So if you would like to uncheck and share out loud, once we're done with kind of taking a few minutes here to read through the chats, I'll open that up in just a second. Can I get a thumbs up if you're done reading through the chat? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I am seeing things like empathy interviews, relevant conversations, checking in the hallways, just kind of as they enter and leave, asking them questions about their lives, having them bring in objects to talk about themselves, using the first 3 minutes to kind of take that moment of connection and building. The All About Me page, trips trips around every other month to see different countries and reading books and short videos. Okay, cool. So thank you for sharing those ideas with us, and your approaches and the chat. A lot of them are kind of non-techie approaches. And what I was going to say here is that they're always important. And we're by no means saying the technology would replace them. I would say actually keep them and have these, think of them instead as being like a layering effect. So you're going to be weaving, again, technology in throughout your day. And what we kind of want to show you is how technology can help you do many of these things that you're already doing, and then add in another element to be able to help you do that. So as students are coming into your classroom, you're definitely still greeting them. You're saying hello. You're providing relevance through the curriculum that you're choosing for them. And then we want to show you some kind of more specific ways that you might think about how to use technology to do these, to add additional parts to that. So I'm going to kick off our example sharing time, just saying that we're going to focus this first section on how technology helps you get to know your students better. And sorry, I'm moving my cursor around here. Just how you can show your students. I think an important way technology helps is that it really sets up an environment that is showing teacher care. So if I am providing assignments that are going to be getting to know my students, I'm showing my students that I care about their different personalities, their different, their cultures, their identities, and who they are as individuals. That's how these assignments help. So one of the first things that I wanted to share was just an example of one of my favorite routines. I used this with my second graders when I was teaching third graders that I had later. And I've done it with middle school students, and I'm even using it with graduate school students now. So this is a welcome survey, and you can create these in Google Docs. So if you're not familiar with them, they're a very efficient way for teachers to make connections with students. So when students are walking in your classroom and you welcome and greet them, you're making a personal connection in a non-techie way. And this is another way that teachers can gather information. When students are walking in your class, they may not want to share what's going on with them in front of other students, things that they maybe need help with academically, they may be tired, they could be upset. And this is one way of gathering things that can inform how you interact with them. It's an ongoing form. I used to have the link to this form and in QR code formations around the room. It would be on my website. It would be on any Canvas or LMS type applications that you're using. They can use their phones to access it. They could use the computers, and they can share computers if needed. But it's asking some relative questions And I'm just going to go ahead and click here and open up this next page to show you. Sorry, wrong place to click. Some of the questions up, I'm going to need their name. I might ask them some quick Likert style questions, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how'd you sleep last night? That will indicate to me whether they're tired or they've gotten their best sleep ever. I'm going to ask how they're feeling now. This is just kind of picking up some of that qualitative information about them that might not be the data that's telling me, oh, how are they getting the math concepts? But this is telling me how they're feeling. I'm going to ask them, I usually ask them if they want to make a personal goal for the day. That helps me understand how I can help them in their learning goals better. And then I have the last question, is there anything that you want me to know? It's a quick survey. As soon as the students walk in the room, they can fill it out. But on the back end of this survey, what you'll see, and I'm just going to show you this, I have the names redacted, is as a teacher, if this were the entries for one day for my students, it would allow me to very quickly go in and I can scroll down and I can see, okay, all these students are feeling good. And then I have one student who kind of clicked on, meh, I'm not feeling all that great. So I might want to make some time in my day to go in and check in with that student. I don't have to go up to them and say, hey, why did you put meh on the, the welcome sheet today? But I might walk up to them and say, how are you doing today? And make an extra effort to go over and talk with them when there's time. As I go down the list too, you can see I have other things highlighted again. What are their learning goals for the day? I can see I have a lot of students working on being present. So I would make sure that I mention in my teaching, how can I help my students stay present? I can see there's a few that are saying getting organized. I might want to make sure, if I'm noticing over the week, there's a lot of students saying they're having trouble staying organized. How can I bring in supports to help them with that? For this group, I had a quote that I always had them come in and respond to that had to do with our lessons. But I also have in here this question, is there anything that you would like me to know about you in general today? And you can see even with these students, the student was still recovering from a stomach illness. They weren't feeling 100%. Another student was really wanting me to know why she was late to class. And I know that if she had not had this opportunity to kind of take that and put that off of her plate, and make sure that I knew that could be on her mind the entire time that I was teaching. Other students, she was saying, there might be this, she's just telling me there might be a duplicate, but I have other students in here who are like, I'm feeling overwhelmed today. I'm feeling the heat of closing in my class, being in a new teaching assignment. Is there anything specifically that I'm just exhausted today? So when you hear from students and they know that this is a place where they can have these conversations with you and you can go and follow up with them individually, one of the things that I find is it does help to build that rapport between me and my students, that you're building a safe space for them. And really the questions can range the gamut. Over here on this column E, questions that I might ask them in the beginning of the school year might be, what are your preferred learning methods? How do you feel about talking about yourself personally? How do you feel about sharing? Are there ways that I can make your learning journey here more comfortable for you? Do you have preferences for where you sit in class? Lots of different questions that you can ask students. And what I find is at all levels, they want to answer those questions. And it's part of that routine of just coming in and getting started that day. Are there any questions about how that works or how we're implementing it? Okay.
Pam, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that grad students for the last one that you just showed us?
Yeah, so I have used it with younger students. Here in this other welcome one was a little more simplified, and you can use images to indicate if you have really young kids, rather than a Likert scale from 1 to 5, because I know sometimes that can be hard for kids to interpret. You can put in, happy face. Kids understand emojis. So you can put in different images that might help them select. If you have students who have different languages, Chris is going to show you later how you can use tools to flip the languages to different ones using Google tools. And I know that Microsoft has similar tools. But yeah, the responses I got, and they're much longer responses, those were graduate students. Okay, so I think, going to stop sharing. Carrie, would you like to have control? and give you the opportunity to share?
That works, sure.
Perfect.
Bear with me, everyone. I just need to share my screen really quickly. All right. So as Pam mentioned, there are a lot of different ways to get to know your learners, and she shared a few that work with the welcome survey. And there are some other ones that you can consider doing, like having your students create Google Slides at the beginning of class that just kind of talk about what they want you to know about them and what they want their classmates to know about them. Because we always like to include something Microsoft as well as Google, a similar way to do that is to have students create a Microsoft Sway. And Microsoft Sway is kind of a mix between a website and a PowerPoint. So it creates like a little web page for them that you can scroll through. They can blog about themselves. Blogging is a really great way to have your students express themselves so you can get to know them, or create videos about themselves. And then one that's really useful, and all of these have links to programs where you can do these things, they can create identity self-portraits. So who are they? What do they want to share with their classmates and with you? Another one that's linked here is a template that you can copy for an identity box. And so this takes the idea, at least when I was in school, we had to make a identity box out of a paper box, and you would put things in there that really represented who you were, your culture, you know, your family members, your values, things like that. And so, of course, you can always do that physical box, but you can also, if you want to, consider doing a digital box with your students where they just take a Google drawing and they pull over different shapes. So the template that is here can be adjusted, and actually I will adjust the link so that you have the template rather than the example when you go back to it. So this one's the example, but you can just have them type into it and then pull over, and it's their little mini identity box that is no longer a physical one, but it's a virtual one. Additionally, another one that can be really cool is to have them create their own social media profiles. And, you know, this could be whatever social media is the most prevalent at the time. The one that I have linked here was from a student who did Facebook profile, and I took out the picture and the last name, but this basically, they put in their name, they put in a picture that represented them, and then they were doing a journalism program, and so they were talking about what magazine they would want to work for, and then pictures that really represented some things that were important to that person. So those are all really great ways to get to know your students. And I know that Pam also linked here the selfie album. So Pam, would you like to share a little bit about that? I can click into
Yeah, if you don't mind clicking on it. This is basically just a Google slide, and it's something I've seen teachers use, but students really do seem to like it. They are given the opportunity to take a selfie and kind of add to it as they want to, and students, the slide deck itself is made available for students to go in and take a look at later. But it's just students given the opportunity to kind of tell each other something about themselves. And the way this example shows a good example that's kind of at the level of, hi, this is me, this is who I am. But I've seen teachers, as the students in the classes get to know each other more, they take it a little deeper and a little deeper. This is how I like to learn. This is what my family means to me. You know, so that they can tell you what they want you to know about them. But they're also letting their friends in the classroom know, this is, you know, this is what's important to me. This is who I am. There's also a scavenger hunt. I thought this was kind of an example of something that could be used in your classrooms. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to see it. Thank you. And again, it was just kind of another way to have, it's sort of the formal instructions for how you might go about looking into who you are and sharing that with others. And again, you want to make sure that you're honoring how much students want to share and how much they don't want to share. So I usually try not to put too many parameters on it. I'd like to give ideas, but then make sure that you're, leading with a classroom that is open, but at the same time, again, students will take it to the depth that they feel that they want to at that time.
All right, thank you. And some other things to consider as you're trying to really get to know your students and to connect with them so that you can help to make sure your class represents the identities of your students. One thing as a teacher that you can do is create empathy maps for your students in this template. Oh, lovely. Give me 1 second. This template here is one that you can use to basically go through and think about who your learners are, what they think about, what they say and do, some of their pains and their gains. And you can have students do this about other students if you really want to engage them in identifying with and understanding each other. It's a great way to build empathy with students in your classroom. You can have them create their own little comic strips or memes or avatars, and these are all linked to ones. So this meme one is a really fun one too, where students can just quickly jump into it and create a meme that represents them. They can also create storybooks or video stories about who they are and what their history is, what their story behind who they are is. And we have in here at our Linda Vista Innovation Center, we have students create podcasts. And so there's a little sample of students talking about their experiences. And while this specific podcast isn't really about their community or their families or their greatest influencers, you can have students do it on anything that connects to who they are, what their stories are, what their community is about. And I put this in here as well, just because in a survey of the San Diego community, a lot of families have mentioned that the best way to communicate with them is to use WhatsApp, because a lot of families are using that with family members who are abroad, and that's just a key element of their communication. So that's something else to think about too, is just speaking with families or communicating with families in a mechanism and a manner that is most useful for them. So some families aren't checking emails frequently, or they don't have access necessarily to a cell phone. So that WhatsApp can be really useful if it's for families who also are communicating with family members who are out of the country. And I'll turn it back over to Pam.
Carrie, if you want to keep it, oops, you have the next slide. So I was going to say I can talk off your slide. So basically, I wanted to say, those were just a quick few ways that you can set up very specific assignments that can delve into who your students are and give them an opportunity to kind of tell their stories and set the parameters of how they want to be seen by you in again, just one very narrow focus of a technology related activity. But it's also important to state that, it is enough to ask students about themselves and to take the time to do that and to make that kind of connection with them, again, doing it in techie ways and not techie ways. But I also want to say that it's really important that students see themselves reflected in your curriculum. So there are ways to use digital tools and access to resources that are made digital that expose your students to different cultures, language, perspectives, and I'm going to say to narratives that might be absent in the curriculum that you currently are using. So the next section we're looking at is kind of how can you bring students' cultures into your curriculum? How can you look at what's being represented, but also what's not there? If we want to expand our notion of community into larger circles of concern, you may be at a school that doesn't particularly have a lot of diversity that's reflective of the world. You may have some diversity, but then you need to look at, what are my students seeing? Are they seeing people that look like them? Are they seeing people that don't look like them? And what are the narratives that they're hearing that allow them to live more actively in a global community? And in that, I'm making that conscious effort as a teacher to do that. You're showing care. You're showing that this is an important thing for you in your classroom and making space for them as well in that sense. So Carrie, you can go ahead.
And one way to do that, where you can bring in different perspectives and voices into your class, is by utilizing layered text sets. And so layered text sets are really when you group different texts and media into a specific topic or a theme or even a book that you're teaching to enrich the learning and offer different perspectives. And so here there's a link to this one, which was created by the source down below. And if you go into the techie tip, there is actually a link to a template that's way more generic. I'll just preview it really quickly so that you can start from scratch. And so as you think about, maybe you're a language arts teacher and you have required reading, but you want students to really understand the history behind it or the perspectives it's coming from one narrative. What other ways can you show how that experience was for the groups that were involved or from the voices that weren't heard by the main text that you're reading? And so layered text sets really offer a great way to show those perspectives, but also one thing that I love about layered text sets is that it's multimodal. So a lot of our students aren't necessarily learning best by reading a textbook. Perhaps they're learning really well from listening to podcast or watching a video or looking at a comic, that a historical comic or something like that. And so this offers a way that you can give students multiple ways to reach the content and also multiple ways to see perspectives within that content. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Before we jump over to Chris, does anyone have anything they want to comment on or any questions for us before we kind of move on? I see Zerla was asking if the apps and tech tools save student information. So Zerla, I'm not sure if you mean that in terms of their private information, like their, or if you mean like just their assignments, but I will say sort of a little bit of both. So in terms of saving student information, if they're using Google for education, Google doesn't track students across, platforms and things like that. But, some of the interactives, it just depends on if they need to sign in. Usually schools will not let you access things where they are egregiously tracking and keeping student information. If you mean in the sense, can I save work that students are doing or have access to analytics, it just depends on the tools that you're using. I kind of look at these as qualitative ways as a classroom teacher to collect information about my students, in terms of the things we were showing you for, how do I learn about my students? If you're creating assignments that are asking them for information, you're kind of tracking that information. I'm learning about my students. I'm getting to know them. When it comes to creating book sets, I'm going to take my knowledge of my students and I'm going to say, is the curriculum, if I'm doing something on westward expansion, am I showing wraparound ideas or counter narratives beyond what I might just find in my textbook? Are my students seeing, what was happening with my culture during those times? Was this the only thing on the planet that was happening during that period of time? Probably not. So if you're wanting to look at other things that were happening in the world at the same time, or how other peoples saw those events and how they experienced them, then that's where we take a look at providing other resources to bring in. And it all depends on the applications that you're looking toward, but generally speaking, things that are marked for education or things that will make it onto your list of apps that your districts will allow are not tracking students. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a great question. I'm a big advocate for student safety and security, especially online. Well, in that spirit, I'm going to showcase an application known as an 11 Labs, and you're going to see two lessons of the exact same lesson. I actually taught this about 7 years ago in my 6th grade classroom, and I was utilizing it during the week of Hour of Code Week, or Code.org week. And I had the opportunity of teaching my students. I used one of the unplugged activities, but I just want you to see what I did was the first app, we're going to watch the first 30 seconds. And I want you just just watch, of course, listen. And after that, I'm going to show you the next 30 seconds. And then I'm going to put the link to the resource that I use once we finish watching the videos and explain a little bit of what it does. But here's the first 30 seconds of me in my classroom over 7 years ago teaching. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce to you guys what's known as songwriting with parameters. There's going to be 2 vocabulary words I'm going to teach you guys, and which we've already covered because it's part of the vocabulary words this week. So let's all look at the green and purple vocabulary words that I have. The first word is function. Everybody say function. Function. The definition of function. Okay, so that was the first 30 seconds. I gathered this video on my YouTube channel, and you can gather any video that you need a resource for. Of course, make sure you have ownership of it. This is my video, my lesson I created. So I gathered the link and I went into this app called 11 Labs. I'm going to put the link right now so that way you can kind of just dab and kind of look at it. It's going to be in the chat. But I want you to see, I will say that you can have like a 7-day trial, and then you have to pay for it. I decided I will pay for it myself. So I pay around $5 a month. And what they do is they allow you to translate and overdub videos or voicemails or anything else that has a speech or an audible opportunity. So within a span of 5 minutes, I uploaded this video, the link to this website known as 11 Labs. And this is what came out of it. We're going to watch the first 30 seconds of it. Okay. And I decided to use Spanish, just because that's a language that I understand and I know what I'm saying in Spanish as well. So let's just check this out for the next 30 seconds.
Muy bien, damas y caballeros, lo que vamos a hacer hoy, así que voy a presentarles lo que se conoce como composición musical con parámetros. Voy a enseñarles 2 palabras de vocabulario, y lo cual ya hemos cubierto, porque es parte del vocabulario que funciona esta semana. Así que todos miremos las palabras del vocabulario en verde y morado que tengo. La primera palabra es función. Todos digan función. Función. La definición de función es un fragmento de código que llamas repetidamente y una...
So this app, just imagine yourself, you're in a situation and you need to translate something. I know a lot of if you are located in East County, I had the opportunity of serving as an administrator in Cajon Valley. Half my population at the middle school that I was teaching at or was administrating at, where they spoke Arabic. But these languages, I just posted them in the chat right now with their countries of origin. These are the different languages within less than 5 minutes of taking an instructional video. I upload that after my class, teach that lesson. And if I have a student in that class that needs that access, they can have that access within a span of maybe 30 minutes when it comes to recording your video, uploading it to YouTube. You can even put it on an unlisted link. So that way, or a private link or unlisted link, and you could translate it. If you want to dive more details, we can do that later on. I put my information on the notes side with that. But I just wanted to show you all the opportunities of making language accessible immediately, even when it comes to us recording our lessons to our classroom. All right. So that is that. The next slides I want to show you something that's very, very simple. I myself, I'm working on a social emotional survey for an esports team that I'm leading. So I thought I'd just showcase something I literally created within the last 24 hours. But as you can see here, even within Google Docs, you can utilize the tools. And if you click down here, translate document, it'll give you the option to translate it in these options right here. And of course, you would create a new it would create a new document for you if you were to translate it. Now, I understand sometimes the little translations aren't the best, but these are the types of resources that would support our students, at least immediately. I will say I definitely use Google Translate immensely in my teaching career when I had students that came from Korea. I used it immensely last year when I had students that came from Afghanistan, did not know a word of English, but it was because of interacting with an iPad and using Google Translate, being able to say my phrase from English to Arabic, and then switching it up from Arabic to English, having that dialogue with the student. So these are just 2 ways of making language and utilizing technology. So giving students access to your class curriculum and instruction, and also having a real-time opportunity of giving students resources that they may need in the class.
Yeah, and I think when you take that time to make those translations or reach out to families and make an attempt to speak to them in their own preferred languages, that again, you're demonstrating that concept of teacher care and that sense that it's, you wouldn't give this to them and say, well, I translated this for you. You would, it would be something that you are attempting to help students access curriculum, or you're attempting to help parents access the classroom and resources and understanding what their students are doing or how they can help their students in a way that is utilizing technology and some of the strengths of technology. Okay. So let's see. Oh, thank you, Chris. Let me get to the next slide here.
As we do that, I'm putting my contact information. If you have any questions or would like any support, you can feel free to email me at chrisgarcia@sdcoe.net. So just want to lay it out there.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So, we look at language, we look at, how can we go out and get resources, and we'll talk about some resources in just a minute, but resources that can supplement the curriculum, that can bring in other voices, that can bring in other perspectives. Another area that we think about when we think about a student's identity and we think about how to honor that in our classrooms and show that it is important to us and that we do care about it would be in their ways of learning and like, how do they prefer to learn? I was just in another meeting and we were looking at independence versus interdependence. And I know that can be very closely tied to your cultures that you come from, whether you believe in independent learning or you believe in a combination of, interdependent learning. And so our next series, that's what this is going to be based on, is how do we provide for using technology tools, the different modalities that students use when they're learning. How do we bring in their preferred ways of learning, and how do we make those things accessible to them? So I just wanted to make sure you hear from us that is an important concept, but it's one of those things we've kind of pulled out from this intertwined concept of equity that we'll be discussing in a little more detail in our next series or our next session. And then finally, we also wanted to look at finding resources. So let me see. There we go. So how is it that we're going about pulling resources? Where can teachers go if they're looking to augment their curriculum or supplement their curriculum? But as you're beginning to do this, there are some questions that we've put in here that you might ask yourself in terms of your planning. And this was pulled from one of the sessions that our equity team has done called Equity as Access. And I've added links in the notes in this slide deck if you're interested. But just asking, thinking about the histories of students as you're getting to know your students, you are hopefully understanding better what their histories are. We would hope in a very robust school environment, you're talking with the community. You are understanding where students' families and where they are coming from. So how do students' histories connect to your areas of content? How are they being represented historically? How have they contributed to different curriculum areas? And then, what do they do outside of the classroom? How are they learning? What is their method for learning when they're home? How do they interact with their families? What languages do they speak? And how do they process the world around them? That might be the same as the way you do it. It might be different from what you do, but I think they're all things that we need to take into consideration. All right, so Jessica.
Yeah, so, you can leave it up, Pam. I was just going to speak to some of them,
Okay.
or I can throw it back up.
Yeah, sorry, I got it. I didn't know if you wanted to click on anything, so.
Nah, it's okay. I think we're coming to the end, so I'll just overview some stuff.
Okay, let me go back here, sorry.
So I just wanted to share some resources with you guys that are tech tools that you could use to increase representation in your classes. One big one that was huge for me that I discovered only about a year ago was Pexels. And it's very simple. It's just a platform that provides free stock photos, like if you were going to include it into your PowerPoints or whatnot, classroom resources. But the types of photos it includes are much more diverse than what you would get in like a Google search. So I think the link there is linked to like a class search for classroom on Pexels, and you'll see people of all walks of life, all different ages, different kind of locations and different classroom setups. So it's just a really great tool to use other than just Google search. And it's also free, copyright free to use. Another great one is Skype a Scientist. So Skype a Scientist will link you with a scientist that will provide a certain scientist that you're looking for depending on what your curriculum is, but you can also drill down on their request form of like locations of the scientist, if there's certain countries you're in or working with that you want represented, or different races and ethnicities, different marginalized groups, and of course different like disciplines of science. So you can really find people that your students can relate to talk about the science concepts that you're learning in class. For English teachers, Teach Living Poets is a great resource. Different poets that are active today, so not just reading about Shakespeare or including those classical literatures, but actual poets who are living today from all walks of life. And they have lots of different resources there that you can pull from. For elementary school folks, The Conscious Kid is more of just a book list, so less of a tech tool, more of a book list, but it has all different kinds of lists depending what types of representation you're looking for or what types of topics you're looking for, whether it be holidays or like race relations in general. You can find different resources there and different lists. And then also, of course, Learning for Justice has a plethora of lessons and also has film kits and films that you can stream from their site. Amazing posters that you can download for free and just have printed on your own, and a really robust library of different texts, that mostly informational texts that you can include to supplement any textbook curriculum where you feel like stories may be missing. Many times you can find it on Learning for Justice.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Does anyone have any questions or any comments at this point in time? You got it, Carrie. Thanks.
Yeah, another place where you can find equitable text to read is the SDCOE Equity Library. And so it's linked here. And what it is it is a list of vetted and curated resources that the equity team at SDCOE has gone through. And currently they've divided it by grade level. And you can see it that way. They also have it by speakers and presenters. And as you look through it, this just gives you a really good idea of certain books that will have opportunities to raise students' equity consciousness and to just make sure that you're being equitable and identifying lots of cultures and experiences in your classroom. So you can always go through this. I know that they had hoped to have it sorted more clearly in the future, but for now it's just sorted by those grade levels. And then another place that you can find resources that you can use in your classroom, and these resources are going to be free to use or potentially free to remix, is OER Commons. And so OER is Open Educational Resources. And what that means is that they have specific permissions that allow you to utilize them and remix them. And you have to look at the specific permissions to know what you can do with them. But once you've found those permissions, they're basically really great resources to find different types of content that fits your grade level and your subject and meets the standards. And you can find lots of different ways to represent your content in different ways. So let me look up, for example, the Civil War. And I can search it this way by typing it into here. And what I find here is I find the permission level. So this one I could remix and make any changes I wanted to. I also find the rating. And so you can sort by rating, and this is how well it's ranked by the people who are utilizing the OER and OER Commons. You also can do filtering, so you can match it towards specific standards. You can match it towards subject areas. You can match it by language. So if you want it to be in certain languages, they do have it broken up by that. And then I do want to go back to the original search and just show you, in addition to that, if you go to advanced search, you can also put in, like I said, the standards in the language, and if you want it to be evaluated by specific OER rubrics. And so there are certain rubrics that have been created for open educational resources. Two of the main ones are the Achieve OER and the Equip rubrics. And those go through and talk about the alignment to standards, the quality of the explanation, the utility of the materials that you're using, the quality of the assessment, the technological quality, the instructional practice exercise quality, the opportunities for deeper learning, and the accessibility of those materials. And so if you really want to make sure that you're using content that is, useful for not only getting to understand students' identities and really represent relevance to your students, but also quality materials, you can make sure that it's aligned to those standards, and then you can have it rubric evaluated as well. So those are just some places where you can find some extra things that you might want to use in your classroom to promote equity. Turn it back over to Pam.
Thank you. Okay, just to sort of wrap things up, we have 3 big ideas that we want you to think about today around the concepts of equity in and how ed tech might relate to that have to do with identity, diversity, and inclusion. In terms of identity, and I have slides for these if you want to review them later, but I'm just going to kind of talk through them right now. In terms of identity, we would be talking about, does the technology or the tool help address students' self-identified needs, like specifically for those students who have non-dominant sexual, racial, gender, or class identities. We would also be looking at diversity in terms of technology that would help with any language, the background, to give students kind of the background to engage with the social and cognitive work required for the class. So can you use the language tools to help them access curriculum and understand it? And so in that case, the technology would be helping to meet their like a diversity of cognitive and social needs. And then finally, in terms of inclusion, would the technology tool or the resource facilitate sort of an equitable sense of belonging, connectivity, and would it help to create a safe environment that students need to engage in kind of effective collaboration and inquiry? And then finally, I have kind of a call to action for that. So I don't know, did it just disappear? There we go. What if schools adopt a posture that says you don't have to change? How can we use technology tools to say this is who you are, you're more than enough, and how can we support what you need to continue growing? That's sort of my call to action for you. I was just in a meeting today, and it was for our leadership and learning development, and they were talking about socially conscious leadership. And I wanted to kind of, they shared this document. There is a link to it on this slide deck. If you are interested in it, I highly recommend you go back and take a look at it. But what I went through, and I just looked at this document in terms of the practices of socially conscious leaders. And I pulled out some of the things that we were hoping to cover today in terms of showing you these different ways of using technology tools to make connections with your students, to find resources that help make sure that their identities are being reflected in your classrooms and in the curriculum. And then also just to promote sort of a sense of belonging and joy in the classroom. So these are definitely just pulled directly from this document and called out. there. And I think with that, we're sort of at the end of our presentation. I'm just curious, is my screen showing one slide or is it showing sort of a mesh of two?
Looks like it's
One
showing
slide.
one.
Thank you. I don't know what this third screen I have is doing, but I'm glad you can see the one slide. It should be my thank you slide. I know that this is a long day for you to go from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Sorry, I keep staring up like this because you're on the top part of my screen. But I wanted to make sure that we say thank you. We are just starting on this journey. I'm going to be vulnerable and say that it sometimes is a little scary. I have a bit of an imposter syndrome going on because I don't feel like I'm an expert in equity work and I am presenting it to you. But I think that that's important to call out and important to say that we're all starting at different places. And the important thing to me is that we have the conversation and that we are starting the work. So this is the ed tech department's way of starting this work and really thinking what is our part in this process and how can we continue to get better and think about how technology plays a role in a layered approach to making sure students have the best experiences that they can. Are there any questions or anything anyone else would like to say? Thank you, Amber. We really appreciate you being here. I know, again, it's late for everyone. This is that late time period. With that, then, I'm going to say thank you and good night. My team, I will see you all tomorrow. And again, our next one will be in February, I think. It's so far away, but we'll make sure you get all the emails and things you need to join us. Thank you.